Barron Trump had always been an enigma. Unlike the rest of his high-profile family, he avoided the spotlight, sidestepped controversy, and steered clear of the relentless media circus that followed the Trump name. People saw him as the quiet one, the reserved youngest son, someone who had yet to carve out a place for himself in the world. Until that night, the moment everything changed. It happened on the set of the Wendy Williams show, one of the most watched, most controversial talk shows in America, known for its unfiltered celebrity gossip, no-holds-barred discussions, and razor-sharp humor. Wendy Williams had built an empire by saying what others wouldn't. She thrived on pushing boundaries, stirring the pot, and making headlines. No one was off limits. Not Hollywood stars, not political figures, and certainly not the Trump family. On this particular night, she had no idea she was about to meet her match. Not a seasoned politician, not a media-trained celebrity, but an 18-year-old who had spent his entire life being underestimated. The segment began like any other, a string of snarky comments about public figures, a few sarcastic jabs, and an audience primed to laugh along. It was the formula that had made Wendy a daytime TV powerhouse. Then she turned her attention to Melania Trump. The energy in the room shifted. "Oh, let's talk about Melania Trump for a second," Wendy said, her signature smirk playing at the corner of her lips. She tilted her head slightly, a knowing gleam in her eyes. A woman who became First Lady without really saying much. The audience chuckled. Wendy leaned in, playing it up. "I mean, come on, standing around in designer heels. Is that supposed to be an accomplishment? Be serious." A few people laughed louder. Some clapped. "She's a pretty ornament, not a leader, and that is the role model we're putting on a pedestal." More laughter followed, but not everyone was amused. Sitting quietly in the crowd, Barron Trump felt his hands tighten into fists under the table. He had heard it all before. The media had spent years reducing his mother to a caricature, a trophy wife, a silent figure, a name without substance. But they didn't know her. They didn't know the woman who had fought for everything she had, the woman who had raised him with quiet strength and unwavering grace, the woman who had endured more than anyone in that room would ever understand. A camera panned across the audience and caught his face. His expression was sharp, unblinking for the first time in his life. Something snapped, and before anyone could process what was happening, he stood up. The laughter in the room died instantly. Wendy Williams, startled by the sudden movement, looked up. The air shifted. The entire studio held its breath. No one could have predicted what would happen next. The moment hung in the air, thick and unbreakable. The tension was suffocating. The lights overhead burned bright, illuminating the stage, the crowd, the host, and the boy who was no longer just the quiet Trump. For years, when he had owned this stage, she had torn apart celebrities, politicians, and public figures with her signature sass and cutting humor. Tonight was supposed to be no different, but tonight she was no longer in control. The night had been moving fast, each segment rolling into the next with the energy of a well-oiled machine. A messy celebrity divorce, a viral social media feud, and a disastrous red carpet look from last night's biggest event. The crowd was alive, feeding off Wendy's energy, their laughter crashing through the studio like waves. Then, with a knowing glance and a deliberate pause, she set her sights on a new target. "Oh, but let's not forget about a certain former First Lady," she said, tilting her head as if she were about to spill a juicy secret. The room stirred. A murmur of curiosity rippled through the audience, anticipation thick in the air. They knew Wendy had something big to say. She let the moment drag, then finally dropped the name like a punchline in itself. Melania Trump. The audience reacted. Some chuckled. Others leaned in, eager for the takedown. Wendy smiled. She had them. "Now, let's be real here," she continued, dragging out the words for effect. What exactly did she do? Did she ever have a real moment of leadership? Or was she just there? She waved her hand in an exaggerated motion, standing in designer heels, looking pretty, nodding along. She smirked. Please, that wasn't a movement, honey. That was a hashtag." The audience erupted. Some clapped, others whistled in agreement. Winnie fed off the reaction, her expression growing even more animated. I mean, I get it. She's got the look, but is that really what we're celebrating? She lifted her arms dramatically. A woman who made it to the White House without ever really using her voice. The laughter swelled, echoing through the studio, but not everyone was amused. Until this moment, Barron Trump had remained unnoticed in the crowd. He hadn't come to the show looking for attention. He had been there simply as an observer, curious more than anything else. For years, he had avoided the public eye, choosing to focus on his studies, his passions, trying to live as normal a life as someone with his last name possibly could. He had learned to tune out the noise, to ignore the headlines, to let the world say what it wanted about his family. But this was different. These weren't just jokes. They weren't just playful jabs. They were an attempt to erase everything his mother had been through, to reduce her to nothing more than a pretty face with no substance. It was meant to entertain, but to Barron, it felt like a blade cutting through years of dignity, sacrifice, and quiet strength. A camera happened to land on his face. At first, it was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something no one had ever seen in him before. And then, in a moment that would soon go viral, Barron Trump pushed his chair back and stood up. The laughter stopped instantly, and the air shifted. Wendy Williams looked up again, caught off guard by the sudden shift in energy. For a split second, she hesitated. She wasn't in control anymore. And then, just like that, everything changed. For a few agonizing seconds, the studio seemed to freeze in time. The laughter, the easy momentum of the show, vanished in its place, replaced by a thick, uncertain silence. No one moved, no one spoke. Every eye was locked on Barron Trump, and his next move was his. Every eye in the audience snapped toward him, the tall, poised figure rising from his seat. At first, no one knew what to make of it. Maybe he was just adjusting himself, shifting in his chair. Maybe he'd sit back down. But then he stepped forward, and everything changed. His expression was calm, too calm. His face, usually unreadable, now carried a weight no one had ever seen before. There was no hesitation in his movements, no uncertainty in his posture. He wasn't just standing, he was making a statement. A ripple of unease moved through the audience for the first time all night. Wendy Williams was caught off guard. The woman who had spent years commanding every room she entered, controlling every conversation with her quick wit and sharp tongue, suddenly found herself momentarily unsteady. She blinked and tilted her head slightly, as if trying to figure out what was happening. "Well now," she said, forcing a smile, "this is unexpected." Barron didn't react. He didn't smirk. He didn't give her the satisfaction of engaging in the game she played. Instead, he reached for the microphone held by a nearby stage assistant, his fingers wrapping around it with quiet purpose. The studio lights bore down on him, illuminating the sharp angles of his face, still young, but in that moment carrying an intensity that was impossible to ignore. He raised the mic to his lips. His voice was steady, controlled, unshaken. "You speak about my mother as if she's just an image," he said. The silence was immediate and unforgiving, as if she were nothing more than a headline, a joke. "But tell me, do you actually know anything about the woman behind the name?" A murmur ran through the audience. Some people shifted in their seats, a few exchanged glances. Even Wendy, the queen of quick comebacks, hesitated. Barron took another step forward, his presence growing. "My mother," he continued, his voice unwavering, "came to this country with nothing but her dreams and her determination. She learned the language, she built a life, she worked harder than anyone realizes." The audience was frozen, locked onto him. And when she became First Lady, she didn't do it for the cameras, not for the praise, not for people like you who reduce her to a soundbite. His gaze locked onto Wendy, unflinching. She did with grace, with dignity. No one moved, no one spoke. His voice didn't waver, his words didn't stumble. "You call that just standing there in heels?" he asked calmly, though his tone carried the weight of something unshakable. "I call that strength." His fingers tightened around the mic, and maybe, just maybe, it's time we start recognizing real strength when we see it. The room was dead silent for the first time in her own show's history. Wendy Williams had no words. The air was suffocating. The audience, once so caught up in the easy laughter and sharp jabs, now sat frozen in place. Their expressions had shifted from amusement to something else entirely. Wendy, a woman who had built her career on owning the moment, on always having the last word, sat still. Barron Trump stood tall under the studio lights. His grip on the microphone was steady, his voice had not wavered, his words had not stumbled. There was no anger on his face, no desperation, only conviction. And everyone in the room felt it. "You talk about my mother as if she's nothing more than a face in a magazine," he said, his voice slicing through the silence. As if her story didn't matter. As if her journey, her struggles, her sacrifices could be summed up in a joke. The weight of his words settled over the room. The audience, who had laughed so easily just moments ago, shifted uncomfortably. The casual dismissal, the easy mockery, the way they had indulged in the joke without a second thought. It all felt different now. Barron took a step forward, his presence expanding, filling every inch of the room. His eyes locked onto Wendy. "You know what it's like," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, "to leave behind everything you know, to step into a world where people see you as an outsider, where they judge you before you even speak." A hush spread across the audience. The camera panned to Wendy. Her smirk, the one she had worn so confidently minutes ago, was gone, replaced by something else. "You call my mother just a pretty face?" Barron's voice didn't rise, but the power behind it did. "I call her resilient. You mock her for her grace." His eyes never left Wendy's. "I call that strength." His words landed with the force of something undeniable. "She's been scrutinized, ridiculed, dismissed, just like this. And yet, through it all, she has remained composed, dignified. She never lowered herself to the level of those who tried to tear her down." A few people in the audience exchanged uneasy glances. Others stared down at their laps, suddenly aware of how easily they had played into the moment. Maybe that's something worth admiring. Barron said nothing more than that. Silence reigned, complete and unshakable. "Criticism is important," he continued, his voice even and unwavering. "It makes us think, it makes us better. But this," he gestured slightly toward Wendy, "this isn't criticism. This is mockery, and mockery isn't bravery. It's easy, it's cheap, it's entertainment at the expense of someone else's humanity." The words hung in the air, pressing down on the room like a weight no one knew how to lift. Even the sound technicians behind the cameras, the people who had seen it all and who had never reacted to the drama unfolding on set, weren't moving. Barron let the silence stretch, and then, after what felt like an eternity, he delivered his final words. "Maybe the real question isn't about my mother. Maybe it's about us. What kind of society do we want to be? Do we build people up, or do we tear them down just because it's easier?" With that, he handed the microphone back. No dramatic exit, no parting glance, just a statement that had been made in a room too stunned to process it. The audience didn't know what to do: clap, gasp, or sit in stunned disbelief. For the first time in her career, Wendy Williams had nothing to say. The woman known for her razor-sharp tongue, for her ability to turn any moment into a punchline, now sat frozen in place. The playful smirk that had been on her face moments ago was gone, replaced by something no one had ever seen on her before: uncertainty, maybe even regret. The audience was just as shaken. No one moved, no one spoke. The silence stretched between Barron and Wendy like an invisible force neither could break. Moments ago, they had been laughing, clapping, feeding into the rhythm of Wendy's commentary. But now, they felt something else entirely. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked down, avoiding eye contact, as if realizing too late that they had been part of something that didn't feel so funny anymore. The words lingered, heavy and unshakable. Wendy finally blinked, inhaling slowly as if to steady herself. The Wendy Williams of 5 minutes ago, the one who would have fired back with a snappy comeback, who could twist any awkward moment into entertainment, now sat in reflection. She knew better now. Swallowing, she let out a small, breathy chuckle. Not one of amusement, but of realization. "Well," she said softly, her voice stripped of its usual bravado, "I didn't see that coming." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Hesitant, uncertain, but genuine. It wasn't the same as before. This wasn't about mocking someone at their expense. It was something else entirely, an acknowledgement of the moment, of the shift, of the truth that had just unfolded before them. Wendy leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the desk as she studied Barron. "You know," she said, her voice missing its usual theatrics and practice confidence, "I sit in this chair every day talking about people I don't really know, and sometimes it's easy to forget that there's a person behind the headlines, behind the image, behind the jokes." She exhaled, nodding slightly. That was something," she hesitated, then added, "I hear you, and I think a lot of people in this room do too." The audience, still shaken, began to clap slowly at first, then stronger. Barron didn't smile. He didn't bask in the moment. He simply nodded once, acknowledging but not celebrating, because this had never been about applause. It had been about respect. And as Wendy Williams sat back in her chair, visibly moved, she, along with everyone else in that room, and soon the rest of the world, knew one thing for certain. Barron Trump had just changed the conversation. The applause grew, but this wasn't the kind of moment that would be clipped, turned into a viral soundbite, dissected in gossip columns, or twisted on social media. This was something else, something real. Barron Trump had done what no one expected. He had stepped into the fire, not with rage, not with theatrics, but with quiet strength, with unshakable conviction. In a world where voices were often raised just to be heard, he had spoken in a way that made people listen. Wendy Williams, a woman who had built her career on unapologetic critique, on controlling the narrative, now sat in a moment of reflection for the first time. She wasn't just the one leading the conversation. She was part of it. As Barron sat back down, the weight of what had just happened settled over the room like an unspoken truth. He hadn't just defended his mother. He had reminded everyone that behind every headline, behind every public figure, behind every easy joke, there's a person, a life, a story that deserves to be more than a punchline. And tonight, that truth had been heard by everyone. Perhaps the most powerful moment of all wasn't when he spoke. It was what came after, the way the audience looked at him differently, the way Wendy Williams, for once, chose reflection over rebuttal, the way the silence carried more meaning than all the laughter that had come before it. Barron Trump had walked into that studio as the quiet one, but by the time he walked out, the world would never see him the same way again. His moment of quiet strength was more than just a viral moment. It was a lesson, a reminder that true power doesn't come from the loudest voice, but from the most unwavering conviction. In a world where social media thrives on outrage, quick judgments, and easy entertainment, maybe it's time we ask ourselves, are we really listening, or are we just waiting for our turn to speak? Mockery has become entertainment. Tearing others down has become easier than trying to understand them. But what does that say about us? Instead of laughing at headlines, maybe we should be looking deeper. Instead of reducing people to stereotypes, perhaps we should be asking about their journeys. Because strength isn't just about standing tall in the face of criticism, and respect doesn't mean silence. It means knowing when to speak, how to speak, and why your words matter. So here's the question. In your own life, have you ever had to stand up against unfair criticism? How did you handle it? Let's talk about it. Because real conversations, the ones that challenge us, push us, and inspire us, start with moments just like this. This story isn't just about a single moment on live television. It's about something bigger. It's about the power of standing up even when the world expects you to stay silent. It's about the difference between mockery and meaningful conversation. And most importantly, it's about the way we choose to treat others in today's world, where outrage spreads faster than understanding. We've turned people into headlines, into punchlines, into names without stories. But behind every joke, every easy criticism, every casual dismissal, there's a person, a life, a story that deserves to be more than just entertainment. Barron Trump's moment wasn't just about defending his mother. It was about reminding all of us that strength doesn't always come from the loudest voice. It comes from conviction, from self-control, from knowing when to speak, how to speak, and why your words matter. And that's a lesson we can all carry with us. Let's take this conversation further. Have you ever had to stand up against unfair criticism? Have you ever felt like your story was being oversimplified, misrepresented, or turned into a joke? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button to show your support for meaningful conversations. Subscribe so you don't miss more content that challenges, inspires, and makes you think. Share this with others because real change starts when we start listening to each other. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about what we say, it's about what we choose to hear.